Hello, I'm Sarah the Gallifreyan Ravenclaw. So this is kind of part two in the weirdest sense possible of this is similar to the Doctor Who one I did, but you don't have to have seen the Doctor Who one if you're not interested in Doctor Who. So I've a number of times when on other channels seen where people in polls and videos and stuff saying about side characters and if they have McGonagall, Snape, Dumbledore, Voldemort as an option, there is always multiple comments along the lines of, no way did he call Dumbledore a side character, or McGonagall's not a side character, or Voldemort's literally the main villain of the series, how's he a side character? That sort of thing. I'm sure if you were on these same sorts of polls, you know the kind of comments I mean. There will always be comments like that. So this is going to be a long video because there are an awful lot of characters to factor in. I think I got 185 in the end, which isn't everybody. There is no way I could have done it with everybody. I stopped when I got to like the level of Archie from the Quidditch World Cup, who was the guy wearing the skirt, and like most of the muggles, to be fair, just sort of any muggles Harry randomly encounters, that sort of thing. No, they're not included. I couldn't be bothered to try and figure out how many of those to include. So I've got the majority of the main characters. There are probably people I forgot who should be on this list, but it gives you an idea of the kind of idea, and I will put the link to this list in the description and a pinned comment. And if you want to fill it in yourself, just reply to that comment saying I filled it in, and I'll have the email address for this channel as well, so you can email it over. Or I think you probably can post it as a community post if you have your own channel, but I'm not quite sure how. I think you @ me or something. I don't know how that works. If you know what I'm on about, then you can do that. Otherwise, email it to me, and if you want me to put it up as a community post, I'll be happy to do that. Just tell me what name you want me to put as the person who did it, that sort of thing. I've also not included anyone who's sort of next generation, so only in the final chapter. And I am counting Teddy Lupin as that, although technically he was born earlier in the book. We only really meet him in that chapter. So there isn't like Harry and Ginny's children and that sort of thing. And obviously this is based on the book. As anyone who follows this channel knows, I'm a book fan, not a film fan. I've seen them a few times, but I'm an expert on the books, not the films. So although I had to use pictures from the films, some of them require a bit of creative license, so I will be having to explain who some of the characters are, because I had a few issues downloading the pictures. There were ones where I went, oh, that looks like it possibly is from the film. But I wasn't sure, because when I searched like Lily Potter, tell me why the 4th picture's of Karen Gillan. Some of the others I wasn't sure whether I was getting the right person. That one I know for a fact Karen Gillan was not in the Harry Potter series. So if some of these pictures are just like fan castings, apologies. I tried to avoid those, but I wasn't sure whether I was succeeding in some cases. Also, apologies, I do have a cold right now, so I may be sniffing a bit, but I'll try and cut out the worst of my cold. So, you should hopefully now be seeing the screen. So I've got the template I only just set up. So, main character, supporting character, side character, minor character, and nobody character. So nobody was more for sort of the people I didn't end up downloading, but we'll see if anyone ends up in it. And there are some non-humans on this list as well as people who, yeah, I said some of these pictures do require a bit of creative license. So we'll go through them. So, if we're starting in order, the top picture is Vernon Dursley. He's clearly quite main. The Dursleys are in every single book, at the beginning and usually the end. So, I'd say he's at least supporting. I think you probably have to be in more than the beginning of every book. They're only in sort of the first couple of chapters in a few of them. Then you get to James Potter. As I said, this is senior. I'm not including the children. Well, seeing as he's dead before the series starts, that makes it rather awkward. As he's dead before the series starts, I think he can't really be any more than a minor. I might move him down later. Depends on some other people. The next one is Padma Patil, who's Parvati's twin, who's in Ravenclaw. Although in the films they show they're both in Gryffindor. And they didn't even use identical twins, but they are identical twins with one in Gryffindor and one in Ravenclaw. So she's definitely more minor than her sister. I'm going to put her in minor at the moment, and we'll see. Then you get to Bill. So Bill's appearances in the books are mostly in the later half. I think he doesn't appear till Goblet of Fire. I may be wrong with that, but I don't think Harry meets him till Goblet of Fire. He certainly meets him before school that year, because then he obviously comes to visit in the Triwizard Tournament with Mrs. Weasley. So he certainly is main in the second half of the series. This picture's obviously from the final film, as that was when he actually had some lines. I'm going to put him inside. Then we get to his little sister. Well, I think she goes right up the top, doesn't she? And she's not really in the first one, but I think from then on she gets the top. She's not first or second, but well, she's not much in the first and the last. But I still think she probably qualifies for main. Then we get to Susan Bones, who is in the DA, and she's in the DA, and she's mentioned a few times in relation to her families, because she had somebody who died at the hands of one of the Death Eaters who escaped with Bellatrix, so she becomes a celebrity around the school at that time, and obviously she's Madame Bones's niece, so she's the one who even knows that Harry can perform Patronus, and asks him in the meeting at the Hog's Head. So I think she gets side at the moment with Bill. So then we get on to Pettigrew. Now there's a better question with this. Do we mean main by how much they appear, or how important they are to the story? Because the entire, like, 5th, 6th, 7th book wouldn't have happened without him. Like, can you imagine if Wormtail had actually, like, died as Scabbers, like Crookshanks had actually eaten him? What would have happened to the rest of the series? So, if you're going by plot-wise, he's a lot more important. If you're going by how much he actually appears, if you don't count Scabbers, which is a very big question of if you do count Scabbers, even then Scabbers isn't that main, he's just sort of there. If you do count Scabbers, then he's in all of them. But if you don't count Scabbers, then you've only really got like the bit in the Shrieking Shack, the graveyard, some of Harry's dreams, and then his few bits in Deathly Hallows. We see him more because we see lots of Death Eater meetings ourselves, but Harry doesn't. So I think I'm going to put him in supporting at the moment, but I think he may get demoted. Aunt Marge. She's only in one. She's only in about 2 chapters. All she does is get blown up. We do see more of her in some of the flashbacks, like when her dog was chasing Harry up a tree when he was like 10, in like his memories when he's having the occlumency lessons. But I'll put her in minor at the moment with her brother-in-law who she hates. So, well, is it brother-in-law? She'll be very happy I've put her next to James, but so the next one, that is Ernie Macmillan. I'm assuming the picture is from Chamber of Secrets, as that is the one he is mainest in, because he's obviously Justin's best mate, and the one who's going around saying, oh, Harry's the heir of Slytherin. So he does appear in later ones. He's certainly, I think he's the one who does NEWT potions. So we do see him in some of the other ones, because like he's in the NEWT potions class, and he's the only Hufflepuff, so he sits with the 3 Gryffindors. So we do see more of him then, and he sort of goes around talking about the OWLs and that sort of thing, and is in the DA. So I'd certainly put him side. I think he's probably mainer than Susan, but I'm not sure if I'm going to do actually ranking them within their categories, but we'll see. Right, the next one's Ron. His sister's already up the top, so he definitely qualifies for that one. The next one is his sister's Pygmy Puff. Yeah, I think that's a nobody. I think a Pygmy Puff's a nobody. Archie? I think it's called Archie. I can't even remember the name of the Pygmy Puff. Luna. Now, I said most of the DA members are just going down the bottom. But she's with Ginny, probably. We'll get to Neville in a minute, but there is a trio name for them. I think people call them the Silver Trio. So they have the Golden Trio, are Harry, Ron and Hermione, and then you have the Silver Trio, which are Neville, Ginny and Luna. So I think by that terms, she goes up the top. She's not quite as main as the other two up there at the moment, and she does only appear in the second half of the books, but she is main, especially in the books. In the films, she still disappears half the time, but she is very main, and so much so that she is actually still quite main in the films. That's always a good measure for these. If they actually bothered to include them in the films, it shows how important they are. So next is Cho Chang. So another DA member, so she gets at least a side, because I think being in the DA gets you at least that high. Then you have all the Cedric and relationship stuff with Harry. I'm going to put her in supporting. I don't think she's main enough. She's only really in 2 books. I'm still in over the films for why is she at Hogwarts? She was the year above Harry. She's still there. Did she fail 7th year or something? Next, we've got both Dumbledores in a row. So we're starting with Aberforth. So in the books, he's mentioned as the landlord of the Hogshead a few times, especially when they have the original DA meeting in there. But he's not named, it's not known he's Dumbledore's brother until the last book. So I'm going to put him as a minor, because he does make a few guest appearances throughout, but you don't even know who he is until the last one. Then you get to his big brother. I think he goes right at the top, doesn't he? I don't think you can put Dumbledore anywhere other than main. As I said at the beginning, he was one of my examples of people that everyone complains about if you refer to them as a side character. Next is Electo Caro, who was a Death Eater and a teacher at Hogwarts. I think she was Muggle Studies and her brother was the Dark Arts rather than Defence Against the Dark Arts. But I may have got them the wrong way round, because they're only in the 7th book. I don't think either of them are in any of the other battles. They're not the Department of Mysteries. They're not on the Astronomy Tower. To my memory, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't recall either of them actually being active in those battles. So they're very minor Death Eaters, even in that sense. Probably how they got away with putting them in Hogwarts without people realising they were Death Eaters. If Bellatrix had become a teacher, people might have raised a few eyebrows. So I'm going to put her as minor. And I might just grab her brother simultaneously if I can find him. There he is. So he also goes in minor. So next is Alicia Spinett, who is a reserve on the Quidditch team by Harry's 2nd year. And then I think it's once Oliver's left, she becomes a full member of the team. I think that's how it works. So she is on the Quidditch team for most of Harry's time at school. She's certainly there in the team in the later years. I think I'm just going to put her inside. She's not a main member of the team. You sort of hear of her. She's occasionally there in the matches. She's in the DA as well. And so she's definitely in the team in the year that Fred and George and Harry get banned, because she's one of the few members who remains at that point. Next is Amelia Bones. So I've already said Susan's aunt, who was the one who was supposed to be leading Harry's hearing, but then Fudge and Umbridge got involved and took over. So she was then murdered by the time the Death Eaters and Voldemort come out of hiding. They murdered her, so we only really saw her at Harry's hearing. I think she only gets minor for that. Right, the next one, this is apparently Andrew Kirk. Some of these I just had to trust Harry Potter Wikia that they had the right person. Who is one of the 2 replacement beaters for Fred and George when they're banned. By the time Harry runs the trials the next year, neither of them get back in, but they are the beaters for the rest of that year. I'm going to put him as minor, partly based on the fact I had to look up their names, and I'm just going to try and find his friend. Where's the other one? I can't see them. Some of these pictures didn't load. That's helpful. No, I can't find the other one, but I've got a few blank pictures, so it's possible he's one of them. The other one is Jack Sloper. So when I find him, I will be putting him next to him. Jack Sloper does appear again in the Half-Blood Prince. When Harry's running the trials, Jack Sloper does come up and sort of go, "Oh, hi, yeah, I'm in again, right?" And Harry's like, "No, there's an entire line of people trying to be beaters. You weren't that good. You're probably not going to get back in." And he doesn't. He does find better beaters. So the next one is Maripé Gaunt. Again, if you're doing this based on storyline, she should be right at the top. Without her, there was no Voldemort. But in terms of actually meeting her, we only meet her in the flashback of Bob Ogden's memory, and we hear of her from Mrs. Cole from the orphanage. So I'm going to say that probably makes her a nobody. If you were doing it based on storyline, she'd be right at the top. But right, this next one, I did say I had a few non-humans. This is the most laughable of that lot. The Ford Anglia. Whether you can count it as it's alive is probably the answer's yes. So that's why I sort of included it half as a sort of joke, but I did wonder whether it could actually qualify. So it does appear to be alive. It's quite main, certainly in Chamber of Secrets. I think it is referenced that it actually fights in the Battle of Hogwarts as well, but that's pushing it. I think it's kind of a nobody, isn't it? It's pretty much a sentient car. The next one is Anthony Goldstein. This is one I did have to end up using a animation picture of because I couldn't find any decent picture of him. So Anthony Goldstein, so he was in the DA, he was a Ravenclaw, and he was in Harry's Year. That's pretty much all we know about him. So I'm going to put him inside just because I have put anyone who was in the DA that high. Actually, were the Patils in the DA? I think they may have been. I think the Patil twins were in the DA, so I'm just going to move her up as well. So the next one is Aragog. So we only meet him in Chamber of Secrets, but we see his dead body in Half-Blood Prince. He's certainly main to the plot of Chamber of Secrets. I would say he's probably not too main after that. So, I think I'm just going to put him as a nobody. Although he's obviously important to Hagrid's storyline, as Hagrid would be a fully qualified wizard without him, possibly. Tom Riddle may have still framed him, but without Aragog they may not have had any proof. The next one is Filch. I'm going to put him in supporting. He is very regular, very main. He's in every book. He tells Harry off practically every year. So I'm going to put him in main. Next is Mr. Weasley. Now, would you say main or supporting? Sorry, I put Filch in supporting. Would you put Mr. Weasley in main or supporting? I think I'm only going to put him in supporting, just because he's not at Hogwarts. If he was at Hogwarts, then he'd be higher up, but you only really see him at the beginning and the end, and occasionally at Christmas. Next is Augusta Longbottom, Neville's gran, who for some reason only appears in the films for about 4 seconds, because she's very main in the books. We only meet her a couple of times. She fights in the Battle of Hogwarts, I think. I believe she turns up and fights in the Battle of Hogwarts. We meet her at St Mungo's when she and Neville are visiting his parents. She's obviously referenced quite a lot because she's the person that Neville grew up with. I'm going to put her inside. The next one, you probably don't know who this is. She is Professor Babbling, who taught ancient runes. As Harry didn't do ancient runes, we don't really meet her. Hermione references her a few times, but that's about it. So I think she ends up in a nobody. If Harry had taken her subject, it would be a different story. Next is Bellatrix. I'm going to put her in just supporting. I don't think she's main enough to go into main, but she's certainly at least that level. The next one, that is Professor Binns. The cropped picture cut his head off, which is rather ironic, because that's not how he died. That would be more ironic if it was nearly headless Nick. So he's a professor who Harry does his subject until OWL level. He only appears in the films in Chamber of Secrets. No, actually he doesn't. Chamber of Secrets is his mainest appearance in the books because he tells the story of the chamber. But in the films, I believe McGonagall says it rather than him. So he's certainly main enough for that. And lots of things happen in his classes, like Harry finds the attacked Hedwig on the wall during his class, and they have a lot of conversations during his class. I think I'm just going to put him as minor. He's not that important because he's a teacher who we don't see an awful lot of because they don't even know if he's realised he's dead yet. So he clearly isn't quite with it because he also, the few times they actually get him to say something, he doesn't know who any of his students are. He's saying random names of people who probably died 100 years ago. The next one is, I believe that's the Bloody Baron. So another Hogwarts ghost. So they aren't in a lot, but the Bloody Baron doesn't do a lot. He controls Peeves, and we learn who he was in life from Helena Ravenclaw. I think I'm going to put him as a nobody, just because you don't really hear a lot of him. The next one is Bob Ogden, who I referenced earlier is the Ministry official who went to the Gaunt house and ended up being the one who started the arrest of Morphin and Marvolo, and is the memories we see of the family. So we only meet him in a flashback. He's already dead by the time Harry sees this flashback. So I think he's a nobody. Although, again, if you're doing it on storyline-wise, he is the reason that Dumbledore even knows the backstory of, Voldemort's family. The next one is a goblin called Bogrod, who is the one who Bellatrix Lestrange, who was really Hermione, tries to get into the vault with, and Harry ends up having to put onto the Imperius Curse, so that he says yes to the wand. So he only appears in Deathly Hallows, and is important in the sense that they need to break into the vault to get the Horcrux, so without him they wouldn't have succeeded, but we only really know him under the Imperius Curse, so I think he's a nobody. Right, this next one is Boderick Bode, who worked at the Ministry, was put onto the Imperius Curse, presumed by Lucius Malfoy, to try and steal the prophecy. And when that backfired and he got jinxed, he ended up in St Mungo's in the ward with Lockhart and Neville's parents. And at Christmas, Harry, Ron and Hermione witnessed him being delivered a devil's snare, which then strangled him. So it was reported in the papers, but that wasn't a main thing that most other people realised. It was just Harry put together the pieces and worked out what had really happened, and presumably the Order already knew all that. So we don't really meet him other than Mr. Weasley has a 3-second chat with him in the lift on the way to the Ministry. But that's about it. So I'm putting him as a nobody, although we do know who he is, if you like. Next is Cedric. Now, by the books, we're counting the Quidditch match the year before, which in the films is quite hard to identify because he was recast afterwards. So you watch all those things and they're like, this Hufflepuff Seeker is Cedric. Because no one realises that. So it's in the one where Harry falls off his broom from the Dementors. He's playing Hufflepuff and the Seeker is Cedric. It's a different actor, but that is supposed to be Cedric. So you have all that, and then you obviously have everything throughout the Triwizard Tournament, them both helping each other, and all that, and all the Cho stuff. So I'm going to put him inside. He gets below Cho. No, actually, no. Okay, no. So I'm going to put him in supporting. I'm not putting him below Cho. I was going to put him... I think he gets in the same one as Cho. She appears in more, but less. This next one is Celestina Warbeck, which I don't know if this picture is actually from anything. I didn't think she actually appeared in the films. The only time I could remember her being referenced was Mrs. Weasley listening to her on the radio during Christmas. So I was surprised to find a picture of her. So she's a famous singer in the wizarding world who Mrs. Weasley likes, and by the looks of this performed somewhere. So I'm going to put her as a nobody. The next one, that is Charity Burbage. She was the Muggle Studies teacher until the beginning of Deathly Hallows when she was murdered by Voldemort. And I said her job was taken by a Death Eater so that they could teach how horrible and non-human Muggles were and all that standard Death Eater stuff. So we don't meet much of her because, as I said, Harry doesn't take her subject. Hermione does for 1 year. But that's about it. The only time we actually see her is when she gets murdered. And that's just, we see the Death Eaters murdering her. So I'm going to put her as a nobody, just because we don't really see her before. Now the next one, if you haven't figured out, that's Charlie. That is the only time he ever appears in the films. I had to crop that picture myself, because that is his only appearance in the films. So in the books, he is a lot more main. We don't meet him in the first one when they're talking about sending Norbert to him, but we do hear from him in the letters, and then it's a group of his friends deliver Norbert. And then he is one of the people looking after the dragons during the Triwizard Tournament, and Hagrid asks him about Norbert, and then obviously we see him more with Weasleys, although he's in the Order. We never see him at Grimmauld Place because Dumbledore wanted as many people overseas as possible, so leaving him in Egypt was a good move for the Order. So I'm going to put him as minor. He's still a Weasley. We still see him a good few times. We see him a lot more than the films do because this is just their picture from Egypt. So the next one is Colin Creevey, who in the films only really appears in Chamber of Secrets when he gets petrified, but in the books appears a lot more, including sneaks back for the Battle of Hogwarts and dies during it. Oliver Wood, I believe, is the one who finds his body. So he appears a few more times and is in the DA. So I'm going to put him in what is pretty much the DA category. Next, that is Cormac McLaggen, who tries out for Keeper at the same time Ron does, and then Hermione may have confunded to help Ron win the spot. And I think he's also in the Slug Club, so he appears quite a bit in Half-Blood Prince onwards. But I'm going to put him as a minor character because Harry bunks off the Slug Club meetings as much as humanly possible by organising practice. The next one, that is Cornelius Fudge. So he's obviously quite main as he's the minister for most of the books. Out of the ministers, he's the one who lasts the most books. So we meet a number of times, obviously when he's telling everyone that Harry and Dumbledore are complete liars, and with all the Sirius Black stuff, he keeps telling him how he keeps going around trying to catch Sirius. I think that gets him supporting. This next one is apparently a picture of Crabbe Senior. So, you can correct me if you think you know better, but this is what Harry Potter Wikia said was Crabbe Senior. So it was a Death Eater who was at the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, was in the graveyard, and presumably fought in the Battle of Hogwarts. I don't believe he was at the Astronomy Tower. So obviously he's Draco Malfoy's friend Crabbe's dad. But I think he also gets captured with Lucius and sent to Azkaban, as most of the Death Eaters there that night do get captured. I think Bellatrix is the only one who gets away. So he fights in a couple of battles, so I think that puts him as a minor. So the next one is Dean. So Dean is obviously in Harry's dorm, so appears an awful lot. So he gets at least supporting, but I would argue he may jump up to main. And if I can find Seamus, I'll move him as well. There's Seamus. Right, let's put Seamus up with him. You won't let me scroll up. There we go. Put Dean and Seamus together as supporting characters, as they're in Harry and Ron's dorm, but they're obviously not as main as Harry and Ron. So the next one is Daedalus Diggle. He's in the Order. I'm pretty sure he's the person who, when Harry first enters the Three Broomsticks, shakes his hand about 3 times and Harry goes, "Didn't you once bow to me?" So he just keeps turning up everywhere. He's one of Harry's biggest fans. So when he's in the Order and they said, "Who wants to go and help us get Harry Potter?" He's like, me. He didn't fight in most of the battles with the Order because in Deathly Hallows, his job was Dursley sitting. He was one of the 2 members of the Order who went and hid with the Dursleys. So he wasn't then appearing much because he was off doing something else. So I'd put him as minor. This next one is Armando Dippet. Apparently. Again, this is a picture, I'm not sure, it may just be a fan casting. Armando Dippet, who was the headmaster of Hogwarts before Dumbledore. So when Dumbledore was deputy head. So he was the headmaster during the time the Chamber of Secrets first opened, and we only really see him in Tom Riddle's memory where he is saying about, if the school closes, I don't want to go back to the orphanage. And he goes, "Is there anything you'd like to tell me?" And he's like, "No, Professor." And then goes straight off and frames Hagrid. He only appears in the flashback and in the portrait. So the portrait is quite regularly mentioned. He certainly speaks when Harry's there on his own after the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. And I think he speaks a few other times, and obviously he's sort of the one Dumbledore goes to for help because he's the one that Dumbledore knew. So I'm going to put him as a nobody, even though he does make more appearances than some of these nobodies. The next one is Dobby. So obviously in the books he appears an awful lot more than the films. In the films they cut out most of his scenes just due to the price of CGI, which is one of the things I'm hoping the TV series won't do. But I think he gets in the side character category. He's certainly obviously main in Chamber of Secrets, and then he's sort of looking after Winky for most of Goblet of Fire, and so looks after Winky for most of Goblet of Fire, and obviously we see him again a few times through Order of the Phoenix up until his death in Deathly Hallows. Next one is Antonin Dolohov, another Death Eater. I think he's at the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. He also broke out of Azkaban at the same time as Bellatrix. So he does appear a number of times. I think he's going in minor. The next one is Mafalda Hopkirk. Technically this picture isn't of Mafalda Hopkirk, it's of Hermione Granger, but we'll ignore that fact. Mafalda herself does make a couple of minor appearances, but even then, if you count when Hermione's pretending to be her, then it would be higher up. But that's when Hermione's pretending to be her, not the actual her. The next one is Hermione, straight to the top. It's not letting me put her at the top. Just scroll up. There we go. This next one is Marietta Edgecombe, who, if you know in the books, is the one who betrays the DA. In the films, they made it Cho for some weird reason. But in the books, Marietta is the one who betrays the DA and gets the sneak marks across her face. So she is certainly important to the plot in the fact that she's the reason that the DA get caught and Dumbledore has to flee and all that happens. But in and of herself, she's just sort of someone in the DA who gets dragged along. I'm not even going to put her in the DA category because they don't see her again. It's other people, the DA, they get to know them and then you see them more. You see less afterwards because her and Cho obviously avoid Harry, Ron and Hermione after that. The next one is Alpheus Doge. So Alpheus Doge was a member of the Order both times, as he was an old school friend of Dumbledore's. And he's at the wedding, he's the one who's telling different stories, and he obviously was interviewed for the book of the life and lies of Albus Dumbledore, but I think he only gets minor. He just sort of is an old man who keeps telling them stories. The next one, that is Emmeline Vance, another member of the Order who was also part of the Advance Party. I think she may have been the other one who hid with the Dursleys, but I can't remember if I'm correct with that. I don't think we see her much again. If she wasn't hiding with the Dursleys, she probably was in the Battle of Hogwarts, but that's about it. The next one is Ernie, the night bus driver. So we only see him twice because Harry rides the night bus in Prisoner of Azkaban, and then he does with Ron and the others to Hogwarts at some other point. I think it's in the Order of the Phoenix, but I may be wrong with that. He certainly rides it a second time with most of the Weasleys and Tonks on their way back to Hogwarts. But I'm going to put him as pretty much he's a nobody. He's just the driver. The next is the Fat Lady. So she's probably minor because she is obviously in every single one. She's obviously in every book because they have to keep telling her the password, and she wanders off in the middle of the night and then they can't get back in when they've snuck out because you're not supposed to sneak out, so she shouldn't need to be there. But she is obviously mainest when she gets attacked by Sirius. Next is the Fat Friar, so another Hogwarts ghost. So not a person we see much of. And I can't even see the... Oh, yes, the Bloody Baron is there. So I'll put him with the Bloody Baron because, again, he's not a ghost we see too much of. He's in Hogwarts most of the time, but he's not the Gryffindor one. He's Hufflepuff, so we don't see too much of him. Oh, great, my camera just died. I'll take that as a hint that this video is going far too long, so I can see how long it's already been. So by the time I've edited this down, it's probably still going to be nearly an hour. So I'm going to call it here. Part 2, probably be a separate one because the amount of time this is going to take to edit. So if it says part 1 in the description, Part 2 will be up soon.